The world has grown increasingly dependent on national and international finances, especially after the worldwide adoption of capitalism and the monetary system. And history has taught us that capitalistic society encourages suffering and scarcity through greed and continuously works for the advantage of mostly the wealthy. A financial collapse can occur when there is a financial depression or when a currency collapses. This can be local or widespread, and these events could be brought about by many factors such as economic mismanagement, war, corruption, etc. For example, when a deep financial disorder is expected, bankers often respond by limiting loans and restructuring their institutions, but often after funneling significant wealth upward. Actions such as these generally disrupt all kinds of markets and a financial recession may ensue. In some cases, the disruption triggers a domino effect that may cause a widespread economic depression. In rarer cases, a complete financial collapse may occur. Financial services, which fuel many other industries, may severely slow or cease to operate in dire financial depressions. During this time and long after, commercial, social, and government services may also be severely impacted or stopped. Scarcity of jobs, income, and money generally triggers scarcity in goods and services in many other markets. There may be scarcity in water, food, electricity, and communication services. Although wealthy governments may continue to provide services in a limited capacity during such times, some governments may be directly impacted and weakened as a result. In some financial collapses, the government may cease services or become ineffective at its duties. Make no mistake, dire circumstances such as the ones described have occurred in the not-so-distant history. In 1929, the U.S. financial stock exchange crashed due to various reasons. Among them was the widespread public panic in the banking sector. There, millions of people flocked to banks to withdraw their funds, causing a widespread depletion of the money supply. In turn, loans became severely scarce, thus drying up liquidity in a plethora of businesses. Also, the consequences of the then-recent World War cannot be ignored. Many countries in Europe were destroyed and the world's power dynamics changed dramatically. The Great Depression quickly spread to the rest of the world, and national and international commerce was deeply disrupted. In its aftermath, millions of people suffered permanent or extended unemployment, displacement, and hunger. In the U.S. alone, unemployment peaked at nearly 25% of the entire population. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed as a coherent government system, and its economy suffered deeply as a result, peaking in 1998. And the many nations that were dependent on the Soviet economy suffered after its government system's dissolution. Cuba stands as an example of this, going through a severe period of financial and material scarcity due to this and other factors. In 2008, the U.S. came uncomfortably close to triggering another Great Depression. Instead, the financial crisis was limited to a severe recession. However, millions suffered from the subsequent high unemployment, goods and services cost inflation. For the U.S., it was a slow and grinding recovery. And in June of 2022, the economy of Sri Lanka was declared as collapsed. That nation suffered severe shortages in food, electricity, and fuel. The country also struggled to provide essential services such as education and healthcare. In our money-dependent society, the negative effects of a financial collapse are obvious. For example, the cruelty and the greed of utility companies will prompt their swift disconnection at the slightest hint of non-payment. And non-payment is very likely in a financial collapse. Likely, your income will stop, your savings may quickly dwindle, and inflation may devalue your money reserves. If payments can't be made not only by you but by most of your neighbors, the utilities will severely slow their quantity and quality of service or cease to operate entirely. This cascade effect may slow or stop water, food, electricity, and communication services. Other goods and services may become scarce or non-existent for long periods of time. The off-gridder will not benefit from a financial collapse, but she may be more able to maintain a safe, healthy, and happier existence than her grid-connected peers, even during and after a financial collapse. Again, this may be possible through the off-gridder's diminished dependence on the monetary system and other systems. As mentioned earlier, if you can harness more of the Earth's naturally and freely available resources, you don't need to pay as much or any money for them. Remember, no one ever created water and food, so those who charge you for them are just mostly interjecting themselves between you and those resources, only packaging them and putting a label and a price tag on them. Yes, I understand it takes labor to farm, gather, and distribute food, but those are things easily done by most of us, at least to a good degree. But we have allowed abusive food costs to be normal. I say we should disallow it. Harnessing water and growing food can be free of monetary needs. I will explain exactly how in part 2 of this text. The same may be the case for harnessing and producing energy and maintaining long-range communications, with few exceptions. Again, if an off-gridder is really not totally disconnected, she may be online with infrastructure, methods, and systems to harness and generate these resources efficiently and share them, all while hardly feeling the effects of a financial collapse. In fact, she or he may benefit from a financial collapse in that they may provide and relay those systems and knowledge to others and become a source of knowledge and freedom for others. Nature-caused catastrophes. Pandemics. As I write this, the world is still reeling from the effects of COVID-19, the 2020 pandemic. As I speak, thousands are still dying every week worldwide, and the death toll at this moment is around 6.9 million. Our response as a world could be categorized as nothing more than pathetic. Some of the most advanced nations and their leadership turned out to be among the most stubborn when it came to taking protective measures. We witnessed as nations chose to protect their coffers over the lives of hundreds of thousands of their vulnerable citizens. In the US, for example, we saw how arrogance and selfishness quelled collaboration and caused nations to deny sharing aid and medicine in or out of their borders. As each week claimed more and more lives during the pandemic, we saw vaccine resistance mobilize with exceptional strength, not only to remain unvaccinated but to discredit the efforts to protect and vaccinate others. In wealthy nations, we also saw how governments redistributed wealth using the pandemic as a pretext, mainly siphoning it from poor to rich, by giving businesses and corporations unjustifiable grants disguised as loans to protect jobs. Curiously, these loans had little requirement to protect those jobs. As millions lost tens of thousands in income and property, governments handed out meager checks totaling a few $1,000s, spread over a period of about a year. These depressive checks were given to the general population without prerequisites, and included the wealthy who surely took longer to deposit their unneeded checks. Also, during this pandemic, we saw how governments used the event to deny entry to desperate poor and dark-skinned asylum seekers and migrants by the tens of thousands, and to further deny aid and relief to oppressed populations in Palestine, Afghanistan, Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East. Things were as violent and cruel as ever. Not only did governments deny aid to largely oppressed populations, but even in America, where the healthcare racism was more exposed, official violence was unleashed when people united in protest in the Black Lives Matter demonstrations. 3 years into the pandemic, after it apparently was wrapping up, but likely having run most of its evolutionary course unwavered, it continued killing thousands of unvaccinated hosts every week. And in the midst of this, a powerful few decide that going to war was the priority of the moment. The conflict in Ukraine erupted in early 2022, and our attention away from the pandemic was then complete, vaccinated and not. By now, the pandemic had evolved into a disease that was just barely more severe than its predecessor, the flu, which originated in the 1918 influenza pandemic. And, embarrassingly, the 2020's COVID-19 caused orders of magnitude more deaths than the 1918 pandemic. Unless you're somehow utterly uninformed about the 2019 pandemic, we should now be quite familiar with the causes and possible worldwide effects of a viral pandemic. We know, as it did, that it can bring disruptions in human migration, water and food availability, social life, and commerce. It may affect necessary supplies of medicine and many other health-related needs. For example, in the spring of 2022, there was a severe shortage of the breast milk alternative, baby formula. In a society where limits are mostly determined by how early you arrive at the store and how much money you have in your purse at the time of purchase, supplies quickly vanished, and many babies and their families struggled to secure the few left and dwindling supplies. all due to the early buyers hoarding vast amounts. Also, rushes on toilet paper and water affected those supplies too, in many areas during the pandemic. Business and government facility closures affected the job market and the availability of countless goods and services, for limited periods in the US and longer periods in other parts of the world. The reaction to the pandemic was quite varied around the world. For example, some cities in China were strictly locked down for several consecutive weeks, while vast areas in the US dismissed the pandemic as a hoax early on. There, local governments and businesses failed to take any significant precautions and many deaths resulted. Apart from the death and health crisis suffered by many individuals during a pandemic, it threatens the economic and material standing of millions. In such events, your income may slow down or stop for indefinite periods, and your savings, if you have any, may quickly dwindle. During that time, many struggled to pay for basic things such as food, rent, and healthcare. Food aid lines were at record-breaking lengths all over the world, and many employers either laid off workers or took little to no precautions to protect their workers from the disease. So many quit. This careless and arrogant corporate attitude toward their employees triggered one of the largest employment resignations and refusal to return to work in American history. Clearly, a worldwide pandemic is a catastrophe, and they are unpredictable as to the course it may take in its severity and the response of the people in charge. For this, living off the grid may bring many advantages. In the early stages of a pandemic, where panic and chaos may break out and threaten safety and many other necessities, an off-gridder may be able to quickly isolate from others. This is the most effective defense in a pandemic. This isolation, however its extent, aids in the prevention of infection and may enable you and others to remain in relative safety and peace during possible panics. So, in a pandemic, the tables turn for off-gridders, as isolation is necessary. Additionally, the off-grid lifestyle helps you avoid all sorts of other unnecessary problems during a pandemic, like how to get basic needs. As in other catastrophes, the ability to harness and store water, grow and store food, and generate energy locally give the off-gridder clear advantages. Also, the ability to communicate through long distances, relatively privately and reliably, may give the off-gridder an edge in coping with the effects of a pandemic. Importantly, the ability of the off-gridder to live without the strict dependence on income is a huge advantage. Given the off-gridder has secured low-cost or free shelter, she or he may live in isolation without the need to earn money for indefinite periods. Even if the off-gridder pays for her shelter, she may be able to hold out much longer than others who use money much more. And some monetary savings, even if little, may go a long way for the off-gridder. Recall, less bills, less need to work for money to pay for those bills, right? More valuable than the technology and the property is the off-gridder's ability to make consistent, smart, and logical decisions. As we saw, logical thinking was thrown out the window in many areas during the pandemic. Logical decisions may be uncomfortable and inconvenient, some for the benefit of many more, but many rather risk it all for the sake of keeping things the same. For example, wearing masks in public, supporting, considering, and taking relatively safe and effective vaccines, avoiding gatherings and crowds, avoiding panic purchasing, etc. As reasonable as these things are, they were the focus of rabid resistance for millions around the world, especially in the US. Hopefully, the off-gridder values empirical, statistical, and scientific evidence, enough to remain objective during a pandemic. Thankfully, world pandemics are rare, but when the next one will occur, naturally, accidentally, or deliberately, is utterly unpredictable. But I wholeheartedly believe that living off the grid is a powerful lifestyle for preparedness, to cope, survive, and emerge from, and to help others during the next possible pandemic. Mega volcanic event. The largest mass extinction event is thought to have been triggered by massive volcanism about 255 million years ago, and megavolcanism is theorized to have contributed to the extinction of the dinosaurs about 65 million years ago. A megavolcanic event is not the single volcanic eruption, occurring once every few years or decades. It is entire planet affecting, caused by a cascade of massive volcanic eruptions spanning hundreds of years. If humans lived through such an event, there would be several generations that experienced only these volcanic conditions. A supervolcano eruption may also qualify as a megavolcanic event. A supervolcano will have an eruption with a volcanic explosivity index of 8 or larger, and the volume of deposits, ejecta bulk volume, would be greater than 1,000 cubic kilometers. This means unthinkable destruction to large portions of a region, with likely planetary-wide impact. I'm talking about entire nations or even continents that may be effectively sterilized from entire species, in other words, entire ecosystem collapse. There have been supervolcano eruptions in the relative recent history, and it is likely one will occur sometime in present times, such as the Taupo supervolcano, modern North New Zealand, Toba caldera, modern North Sumatra. Like these, some were particularly large megavolcanoes, with the Toba caldera eruption and Tetagush group, in what would become modern Canada, 466 million years ago. This event tops the list, with an ejecta bulk volume of around 5,000 cubic kilometers. A looming possibility of comparable magnitude exists throughout the world, including areas in or near Yellowstone National Park, in the U.S. Megastorm. Storms may be classified as storm of the century, 500-year storm, or 1,000-year storm. These are storm cells that can bring unimaginable deluges and floods that may affect entire continents. Such storms have occurred many times in history, and may be the reason why there are several accounts of world-spanning floods in ancient texts. In modern times, some storms have brought catastrophes. For example, in 2005, Hurricane Katrina brought catastrophic floods to the Mississippi River Basin, causing historic flooding, in South Louisiana especially. Officially, about 90,000 square miles were declared part of the disaster zone by the U.S. government. And Hurricane Sandy, in 2012, brought similar flooding to the northeast states of the U.S. And in 2020, unbelievable flooding occurred in 6 nations in South Asia: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. There, upwards of 6,000 people lost their lives directly due to the flooding, and unmeasurable material losses occurred. Additionally, in the summer of 2022, Pakistan experienced its most extensive flooding. There, floods were among the deadliest, with over 1,700 deaths, and one of the costliest disasters in its history. Disturbingly, in the midst of the effects of global warming, flooding is expected to be among the most destructive aspects of megastorms. Living off the grid surely helps. Of course, if the off-gridder escapes the flooding itself. Even if all but life and health is lost, the off-gridder's knowledge and methods may still aid in the survival, coping, and emergence in the aftermath of a catastrophic flood. First, the off-gridder will know to locate shelter in high ground, ideally well before any catastrophe strikes. When this is not readily possible, the off-gridder should monitor the weather and evacuate early during warnings, or at first signs of the event. If evacuation has become unsafe prior to a possible flooding event, then emergency evacuations to high ground may be necessary. This means having a way to navigate in rough and deep water. If the off-gridder already resides in high ground during such an event, she or he should accept in as many refugees as possible. Not doing so on a temporary basis would be criminal. Again, the off-gridder's material and technological aids are likely to help not only the off-gridder but many others around her. Tornado outbreak. In the spring of 2011, there occurred what is now known as the 2011 super tornado outbreak. It is, as of this writing, the largest, costliest, and among the deadliest tornado outbreaks ever recorded. It occurred in the southern, midwestern, and northeastern U.S. from April 25 to 28, 2011. It left catastrophic destruction after spawning about 175 tornadoes that struck the U.S. states of Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. Other states experienced less destructive tornadoes in the same outbreak: Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, New York, and Virginia. In the winter of 2021, areas of western Kentucky experienced a catastrophic tornado outbreak. There, multiple tornadoes traveled an exceptionally long trek, over 160 miles. The destruction was catastrophic to several towns and counties along its path, where 57 fatalities were confirmed and over 4,000 structures were destroyed. If the off-gridder escapes the destructive power of a tornado outbreak, she or he may cope with the destruction around her. Access to water, food, communication, and energy may be uninterrupted if these off-grid systems remain intact. If not, rebuilding efforts may begin immediately, given the off-gridder is unharmed, and fallen structures can be cleared out. The ability to communicate despite destruction of telephone and cellular network infrastructure may be among the most advantageous abilities of the off-gridder after a tornado outbreak. She may be able to warn of impending tornadoes before or as the outbreak is occurring, and may take part in rescue and response efforts in the aftermath. Mega electromagnetic pulse. The unthinkable attack, deliberate nuclear explosions, occurred on August 6 in Hiroshima and on August 9 in Nagasaki, Japan. In addition to the catastrophic and immediate destruction and carnage due to the explosion, there were the effects of its electromagnetic pulse, EMP. The region at the time surely depended relatively little on electronics, outside of the analog telegraph and telephone communications, but surely the electronic system's disabling effects of the EMPs were felt, even there. Further on, the world only narrowly escaped an all-out nuclear war between the US and the USSR in November 1979. The US-based North American Aerospace Command received an automated computerized warning of an ongoing nuclear intercontinental ballistic missile attack, thought to be perpetrated by the USSR. The dire warning was luckily discovered to be false computer inputs from an exercise software program, which in various ways was initially confused as a real-world occurrence by military personnel. At that time, the mistake could have easily been responded to with catastrophic results. A nuclear explosion, especially in the upper atmosphere, can have electronic destroying effects. Electric power, electronic equipment, and communication infrastructure may be disabled during a nuclear attack EMP. As I write this, we are at the highest risk of nuclear war since the Cold War years. A nuclear-armed state, Russia, is at war with its neighbor Ukraine, and the conflict could take a number of courses, including runaway international escalation. A nuclear attack, even in U.S. territory or airspace, is not impossible, and nuclear attacks in other parts of the world are more likely. In the horrific event of a nuclear attack, apocalyptic-level destruction is possible for large areas of the planet. In such an unthinkable event, the off-gridder is likely to benefit from her abilities, mentality, technology, and methods. Also, the off-gridder may quickly be able to adapt to an electricity-less environment and may continue to harness water from a ground source and grow food indoors. Additionally, the off-gridder may have protected her essential electronics, shielding them from the effects of EMP using one or various methods. If those fail, many ancient and electricity-less technologies exist, which may be deployed or brought up to operation. For example, you may use cooling and refrigeration technologies that date back to the ancient times of Persia, or communication may be quickly re-established by constructing analog telephones and infrastructure using readily available materials and equipment. A host of other life-improving electricity-less or battery-operated technologies may be built, if not already available, after the EMP, like icebox air conditioners, solar cookers, solar refrigerators, and even rudimentary cameras. Many electricity-less technologies will be discussed in Part 2 of this text. Chicxulub-like asteroid impact. Few things may affect humanity more than mass extinction events. One of them is a Chicxulub-type asteroid impact. The Chicxulub crater is a now confirmed asteroid impact site near the modern town of Chicxulub in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. It is theorized as being the primary cause of the extinction of the dinosaurs around 65 million years ago. No human may conceivably survive the immediate direct impact of a Chicxulub-type event, not unless perhaps distanced 500 to 1,500 miles from the impact hypocenter. And the consequent earth-changing effects of such an event may further bring destruction of unfathomable numbers of life forms. So, those who escape the direct impact may still suffer or perish due to its effects. Those people fortunate enough to inhabit close to 1,000 miles away from the impact site may find ways to survive the ensuing changes to the planet, but likely only if they are conditioned to quickly adapt to such dramatic changes. The planetary atmospheric and biospheric changes would ensure that only the toughest and most adaptable life forms survive, and I believe many members of humanity have what it takes to survive such an event. But many, perhaps majority, may not. They simply may not be healthy, skillful, or resilient enough to make the necessary adjustments to survive. These adjustments may mean mass continental distance migrations, reverting to hunting, foraging, and gathering food, and quickly securing sources of drinking water. Resources may be especially scarce due to ensuing earthquakes, volcanism, cloud cover, ashfall, etc. The entire Earth's climate may run away into unpredictable and extreme conditions. For example, early-stage ice age conditions may quickly move in, exposing humanity into desperate, otherworldly environments. Our technologies and genetic makeup may rapidly evolve naturally to adapt, but only after mass death and struggle. We may cope artificially through technology and medicine, but for us to cope with technology, it must have already been in place, as after the changes brought by an Chicxulub impact, our technology may be mostly destroyed or unusable. A whole new world would be brought by such an event, one that may remain the same for generations into the future. Living off the grid in such unlikely times may take an entirely different meaning. There may be few artificial grids to speak of throughout the world or to live off from, so going back to nature may be something done by necessity for a large percentage of the surviving humanity. In many ways, the human condition may cycle back and start again, and we may slowly attempt to get away from the ravages of nature and into community and collaboration, hopefully with lessons learned from our detrimental mistakes of the past. Having said all this, again, off-gridders may emerge as leaders under such dire conditions, contributors of knowledge in the art of survival with the Earth's resources, and away from high technology and a monetary system to depend on. Mega-earthquake. Earthquakes for magnitudes of about 9.0 or higher can be classified as mega-earthquakes. Mega-earthquakes have scientifically been called megathrust earthquakes. These earthquakes are caused by a slip along the thrust fault that forms the contact between two tectonic plates. Thrust faults are often at the bottom of oceanic trenches, which can displace the seafloor over a large area. As a result, megathrust earthquakes may result in tsunamis that may devastate areas far from the epicenter. One such mega-earthquake occurred in recent memory in Lumico, Chile, estimated to have had a magnitude 9.5. There, fatality records vary between 1,000 and 600, and the monetary cost of the earthquake adjusted to today is about $5.5 billion. The resulting tsunamis affected other areas of Chile and several other Pacific islands and nations. An undersea mega-earthquake, originating in the Suna megathrust in the Indo-Australian plate, was responsible for the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. This tsunami generated waves of an unbelievable 30 meters in height. The death toll was estimated to be a disturbing 227,000 people in 14 different countries. It was the third most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Asia. In January of 2010, a powerful 7.0 earthquake struck the nation of Haiti near the capital city of Port-au-Prince. Although not classified as a mega-earthquake, its destructiveness to life and structures was extreme. Estimated casualties range from 100,000 to over 200,000. The closeness of the epicenter to a densely populated capital city, the poor living conditions of many of the area's inhabitants, and the dire humanitarian crisis that ensued puts this event in the mega-disaster category. There, massive destruction of residences, 250,000, and commercial buildings, 30,000, contributed to the high number of casualties. Also, poor building practices were a major contributing factor to the destructiveness. The direct effects of a mega-earthquake and/or a tsunami are hardly survivable, but if you were to survive them or not suffer their direct after-effects, living off the grid may help. Utility sources of water may be contaminated or disabled, as treatment facilities may have been damaged. The off-gridder may remain connected to her or his off-grid source of water, thus feeling little change after the event. Makeshift rain collectors may be erected if rain is available, and stored water may be used for months to years if necessary and available. The off-gridder may use stocks of food and produce a sufficient percentage of her or his nutritional needs locally. If food production systems were destroyed, surviving plants and animals may be relocated, and systems may be quickly rebuilt by the experienced off-gridder. Electricity use may be postponed until other more critical systems are brought online, such as food, water, healthcare, and communications. Communications may be quickly re-established after surviving a mega-earthquake, by replacing, repairing, and/or redeploying associated equipment. Among other knowledge, the off-gridder is recommended to learn from past catastrophic events and may have experience with some past disasters. This knowledge and experience, combined with the willingness to assist, supply, and share resources, may enable off-gridders to help herself and others survive and emerge from a mega earthquake.